Everything is all right. Are you all right? I'm all right. Are you all right? I'm all right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. John O'Keefe, present and accounted for here in the office, in my comfy chair, here with you in this wonderful, wonderful part of life called the reading time. Gregor the Overlander. It has been a rallying adventure. Last time we were together, the entire Quester crew, with the exception of one of the spiders, right? And who else? Who else are we missing? Maybe Tick? Maybe not, because what? He can fly. I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. You know what I'm talking about? Like, they were running across a bridge built by the spinners and the humans, all the way across this massive ravine above a river filled with piranha-like fish. 20 rats chasing them. It was this moment of climax, this moment that was getting us up to this part. We were like, ah! And then, whoo, oh man, it was so passionate. It was so passionate. Tick turned around to like face them all and slow them down. Everybody else gets to the other side. Woo! The bridge falls, and then all the rats fall. And then we find out that there's piranhas down there. Why? Because they get eaten by them. Oh, Suzanne Collins leaving us in the lurch. So here's the deal. We're back. We're on the other side of a river. We're still in search of Dad. That is the ultimate goal. There is a prophecy. There is a prophecy that states that all will go for the rats, right? Have to go seeking the Father. And then only 4 will pass and 8 will live, but we don't know who those people are. So let's get back into it. The last thing we remember, you remember? Do you remember? Because if you don't, go back and listen to it because it's worth the time. It's totally worth the time. All right, so we are back, chapter 23. Let's talk about it. We have this moment. Temp collapsed on the bank just as the bridge gave way. 20 rats, the leader still holding Tick in its teeth, plunged into the river below. As if this sight wasn't horrific enough, the water churned as enormous piranha-like fish surfaced and fed on the screaming rats. In a minute, it was all over. The water ran smoothly. The rats had vanished, and Tick was gone forever. So Tick is gone. Even though he was able to surprise us with the capability of being able to fly, let me tell you, those of you who don't live where cockroaches live, which actually is none of you because they live everywhere, because they are one of the most successful beings on this planet. They can exist much longer than we can without food, without water. The idea of them being able to surprise fly when they need to. These animals, these insects, although they are the creepiest of almost the creepiest of crawlies, they are an amazing animal. You got to give it to them, man. They can sneak through stuff. They can almost be completely crushed and still survive. I mean, they're pretty great. Unfortunately, when you're in the mouth of a rat who falls into a water filled with piranha-like fish, you're probably not going to make it out. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, let's get going. Chapter 23. I'm loving being back with you. I'm loving it. Here we go. Chapter 23. Move it, move it, move it, instructed Rip Red, herding them all from the open bank and into the tunnel. He forced them along for a few minutes until they were well out of sight and, hopefully, out of smell of the tunnel entrance. At a small chamber, he gave the order to halt. Stop you, sit you, slow your hearts. Wordlessly. Love that. They are in shock. They are in disbelief. They are did not expect to be attacked by the 20 rats. Wordlessly, the remaining members of the quest sunk to the floor of the tunnel. Gregor sat with Temp, his back to the others. He pawed up Temp's back, found Boots's hot little fingers and entwined them with his own. That's right. Remember, Boots is sick. Boots has got temperature, right? Like, that's a big deal. And entwined them with his own. He had almost lost her for good. She would never have had the chance to meet their dad or get back to his mom's arms or play in the sprinkler with him and Lizzie or do anything ever again. He didn't want to look at the rest of the questers. Every one of them would have watched Boots and the crawlers fall into the river to stop the rats. He had nothing to say to them. He was angry. And then there was Tick, brave little Tick, who had flown into the face of an army of rats to save his baby sister. Tick, who never spoke much. Tick, who shared her food. Tick, who was, after all, just a roach. Just a roach who had given all the time she had left that Boots could have more. Gregor pressed Boots' fingers against his lips and felt scalding tears begin to slide down his cheeks. He hadn't cried, not the whole time he'd been down here, and there had been plenty of bad stuff, but somehow Tick's sacrifice had crushed whatever thin shell remained between him and deep sorrow. From now on, he felt an allegiance to the roaches that he knew would never fade. He would never again take a roach's life, not here and never. Not if by some miracle they made it home. In the Overland, he would never crush another roach. I'm sorry, Tick. I got to own up to the fact that I was just kind of saying that you're one of the creepiest of creepy crawlies, but you did put your life out for Boots. I'll give you Gregor's willingness to maybe not kill you ever again. He felt his shoulders begin to shake. Probably the others thought he was ridiculous crying over a roach, but he didn't care. He hated them. He hated all of the rest of the questers. Temp, whose antenna had dropped down over his head, reached out and touched Gregor with a feeler. Thank you. To weep when Tick has lost time. Boots would weep too if she weren't. Gregor couldn't go on as another wave of sobs began to sweep over him. He was glad Boots hadn't witnessed Tick's death. She would have been very upset, and she wouldn't have understood it. He didn't really understand it either. Gregor had felt a hand on his shoulder and jerked away. He knew it was Luxa, but he didn't want to talk to her. Gregor, she whispered sadly. Gregor, know you, we would have caught Boots and Temp if they fell. We would have caught Tick too, had there been any reason. He pressed his hands against his eyes to stop his tears and nodded. Well, at least that was a little better. Of course, Luxa would have dived after Boots if she'd fallen. The Underlanders didn't worry about falling the way he did, not with their bats around. It's okay, he said. I know. When Luxa sat beside him, he didn't move away. I guess you think it's pretty stupid me crying over a roach. You do not yet know the Underlanders if you think we lack tears, Luxa said. We weep. We weep, and not just for ourselves. Not for Tick, though, said Gregor with a trace of bitterness. I have not wept since the death of my parents, said Luxa quietly, but I am thought to be unnatural in this respect. Gregor felt more tears slipping down his cheeks when he thought of how badly you had to be hurt to lose the ability to cry. He forgave Luxa everything at that moment. He even forgot why he needed to forgive her. Gregor, she said softly when his tears had stopped, if you return to Regalia, and I do not, tell Vicus that I understand now. Understood what? Asked Gregor. Why he left us with Ripred, said Luxa. We have to have a Gnar. I see now he was trying to protect us. Okay, I'll tell him, said Gregor, wiping his nose. He was quiet for a moment, and then he asked, so how often do we give Boots that medicine? She still feels pretty hot. Let us dose her now, before we move on, said Luxa, stroking Boots' forehead. Boots murmured in her sleep, but didn't wake up. They slipped a few more drops from the bottle between her lips. Gregor stood up and tried to shake off the pain. Let's get going, he said, not looking at Ripred. The rat had been in tons of wars. He probably had seen lots of creatures killed. He told Gox to eat Treflix. Gregor was sure Tick's death affected him as little as swatting a roach affected people in New York. But when Ripred spoke, his voice lacked its usual snide tone. Take heart, Overlander. Your father is nearby. Gregor lifted his head at the words. How nearby? An hour's walk? No more, said Ripred. But so are his guards. We must all proceed with extreme caution. Bind your feet in webs, speak not, and stay close behind me. We had rare luck at the bridge. I do not think it follows us where we are headed now. Gox, whom Gregor was beginning to appreciate more as time passed, quickly spun thick silk slippers to pad their feet. As Gregor held his flashlight for Luxa to put on her pair, the light faded. He dug in his pack and came up with the last 2 batteries. Limited resources, but secret weapons from the spider, right? Silk socks that are going to keep them silent as they go through. But we have only 2 more lights or batteries left. It's not going to last long. Will we get there in time? How much longer can your torchlight last? Gregor asked Luxa. He had noticed that they'd gone to 1 torch when they met up with Ripred, apparently to conserve fuel. Now the 1 torch burned low. A short time only, admitted Luxa. Your light, stick. I don't know, said Gregor. These are my last batteries, and I don't know how much power is left in them. Once we have your father, we will not need light. Ares and Aurora can get us home in the dark, said Luxa encouragingly. They're going to have to, said Gregor. The questers regrouped. Ripred led with Temp and Boots behind him. The tunnel was large enough for Gregor and Gox to walk beside them. Aurora and Ares fluttered along next, making short, silent flights. Henry and Luxa brought up the rear on foot, swords drawn. Ripred gave them a nod, and they started off, deep, deep into enemy territory. They tiptoed along, scarcely daring to breathe. Gregor froze every time a pebble moved beneath his foot, thinking he had triggered another rat assault. He was very afraid, but a new emotion was beginning to rise up in him, giving him strength to keep putting 1 foot in front of the other. It was hope. It flowed through him, insisting that he break his rule. His father was nearby. He would see him very soon. If only they could keep moving forward undetected, he would see his father very soon. When they had been creeping along for about a half hour, Ripred suddenly stopped at a bend in the tunnel. The whole party pulled up behind him. Ripred's nose twitched furiously, and he crouched. A pair of rats sprang from around the bend. In an impossible move, Ripred tore out one's throat with his teeth, while his back feet blinded the second. In another flash, both rats lay dead. No one else had had time to raise a hand. Ripred's defense confirmed what Gregor had suspected from the very first moment he looked in his eyes. Even among rats, Ripred was lethal. Ripred wiped his muzzle on one of the dead rats and spoke in a whisper. Those were the guards to this passage. We are about to enter open space. Stay against the wall, single file, for the earth is unstable and the fall immeasurable. Everyone nodded numbly, still stunned by his ferocity. It's all right, he added. Remember, I am on your side. Oh, man. Around the bend of the tunnel was the opening. Ripred made a right turn, and they peeled off in single file behind him. A narrow path led along the side of a canyon. When Gregor shone his light into it, he saw nothing but darkness. And the fall is immeasurable, he reminded himself. The ground under his left foot, the one closest to the void, crumbled and sent a shower of stone and dirt into the darkness. Gregor never heard any of it hit the bottom. His only consolation was that Aurora and Ares were inching along somewhere behind him, ready to save anyone who might fall. After about 50 yards, they reached one more solid ground that fanned out from one end of the canyon. A natural arch of stone framed a wide road, worn smooth by many, many rat feet paws. A natural bridge. My dad and I don't know if anybody else has gone, but there's a place in, I believe it's North Carolina, called Natural Bridge. Could be in Virginia, because if I'm not mistaken, George Washington, the president, when he was a surveyor, before he was the soldier, before he was the president, before he was everything that we know, he was a surveyor. He paid attention to land. And he surveyed this area called Natural Bridge, and he actually carved a GW into the rock. Now, I'm not saying you should do that, but it's pretty dang cool to be able to see a little bit of George Washington carved into the wall of a place called Natural Bridge. Now, a natural bridge, just imagine it. You got river, right? You got water. You've got maybe land on the side of the water. Right now, we're seeing that there's a canyon, like they are inside a canyon, or at least on the top of a canyon. And then there is a natural bridge, a rock bridge that seems to be crossing over, that the river kept as it kind of filled and eroded, and they are going to cross over this natural bridge. It's pretty cool. Hopefully you'll get to see one in your life someday. Ripred, Temp, Gox, and Gregor raced down the road. Luxa and Henry had instinctively taken to the air. Gregor felt as if rat eyes must be burning at them from every crevice. The path ended abruptly at a deep circular pit with walls as smooth as ice. A faint light burned in the pit, revealing a furry creature hunched over a stone slab, fiddling with something. At first, Gregor raised a warning hand. He thought it was a rat. Then the creature lifted his head, and Gregor recognized what was left of his father. Circular prison. Dad, in the basement of this thing. Finally, they are in eyes length of each other. But the lines, what was left of his dad, he's a different man. He's different than when he remembered him, right? It's different now. I gotta keep reading. Chapter 24. The man who had disappeared from Gregor's life 2 years, 7 months, and who knew how many days ago, had been the picture of perfect health. Strong, tall, vibrant, energy that seemed to pour right out of him. The man squinting up at them from the pit was so thin and so weak, his attempt to stand failed. He fell on all fours, then lifted one hand to help tilt his own head back. Dad, Gregor tried to say, but all the moisture had left his mouth. He dropped to his knees and at the side of the pit, and he reached out a hand futilely. They were 50 feet apart, but he reached anyway. What would you do? Your dad, it's right there. First time in that long. In the Underland. Luxa and Henry flew down, helped the pitiful form onto Aurora's back, and carried him back up. Still on his knees, Gregor clutched his father's hands, once so strong and capable. As he felt the bones beneath his fingers, he remembered how his dad used to crack walnuts with his hands. Dad, he said. This time, he could be heard. Dad, it's me, Gregor. His father frowned as if trying to remember something. It's the fever. I must be seeing things again. No, Dad, it's me. I'm here. And Boots is here too, said Gregor. Boots, said his dad. He frowned again, and Gregor remembered that he had never seen Boots. She had been born after he fell. Margaret, Gregor corrected himself. As soon as his mom was pregnant, his parents had planned to name Boots Margaret after his dad's grandma. Margaret, said his dad, now thoroughly confused. He rubbed his eyes. Grandma? The prophecy had named one lost up ahead. But Gregor had not expected to find his dad as lost as this. He was skeletal and weak, and what had happened to his hair and beard? They were snow white. Gregor touched his father's shoulder and realized that he was wearing a cloak made of rat fur. No wonder he looked so much like a rat from above. Just need to sleep, his father vaguely said. This was the scariest part of all. Gregor had thought he would get a parent back when he found his dad. Then he could stop having to make so many hard decisions and try to be the man of the house. He could just be a kid, but the man before him was even needier than Boots was. Luxa laid her hand on his dad's cheek and frowned. He burns like your sister. He has no strength to fight it. This is why he speaks in confusion. Maybe if I talk to him a minute, he'll remember. He's got to remember, Luxa, said Gregor desperately. We must fly now, Gregor, insisted Luxa, tipping a large swallow from the blue bottle into his dad's mouth. We shall heal him properly in regalia. Henry, help me secure him. She tried to tie his dad to Aurora with a length of silk that Gox was rapidly spinning. Henry, said Luxa again. But Henry stood apart from them, not helping, not hurrying, not even bothering to seem anxious. No, Luxa, we have no need to hurry now. It was a strange answer. No one understood what he was saying except Ripred. An odd look crossed the rat's face. No, I believe Henry has taken care of everything. Henry had to, said Henry. He lifted his finger to his lip and gave a long whistle. You crazy? What are you doing? Asked Gregor. He looked at Luxa, who seemed to have turned to marble. The silk rope slipped from her hands and fell to the ground. The patter of many rat feet came at them down the road. What was going on? What had Henry done? Ripred? Said Gregor. Seems I'm not the only spy among us, Overlander, said Ripred wryly. A member of the royal family as well. You mean Henry? Gregor would never in a million years have believed Henry to be a spy for the rats. They had killed his parents, his people. He can't be, blurted out Gregor. He can't. I mean, what about Luxa? The two were so tight. Sorry, cousin, said Henry urgently to Luxa, but I had no choice. We were headed for disaster under Vicus. He would ally us to the weakest, when only our real chance of survival is to ally ourselves with those who are most powerful. We will join forces with the rats and rule together, you and I, Luxa, you and I. Luxa spoke more calmly than Gregor had ever heard her. Not now, Henry, not ever. You must, Luxa. You have no choice. You must join with us or die, said Henry coldly, but there was a tremor in his voice. This is as good a day as any, said Luxa. Perhaps better. She sounded 1,000 years old and 1,000 miles away, but she did not sound scared. So they promised you a throne, did they? Really, Henry? You are not a fool enough to believe that they will deliver it, said Ripred, breaking into a laugh. Ha 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 ha! They will deliver it. Together we will rid the underland of crawlers and spinners and share their land among us, said Henry. But why? Why would you do this? Asked Gregor. I'm tired of having cowards and weaklings as allies, said Henry. The rats, at least, are not guilty of that. Together we will protect each other. Together we will rule. Together we will be safe. It has been decided. Together. Together, said Ripred in a sing-song voice. What a lot of togetherness you are planning. And what a lot of solitude awaits you. Ah, here are your friends now. There were at least 50 rats. The rats fanned out quickly and circled the questers. Most of them were laughing, delighted at the rich catch before them. Gregor's eyes darted around. Who would fight on his side? His dad was mumbling something about fish. Boots lay tied to Temp's back, oblivious to what was happening. Henry was a traitor, so he could count Ares out as well, since the pair was bonded. That left him, Luxa, Aurora, Gox, and suddenly he didn't know what to think of Ripred. What about Ripred? Whose side was that really on? Was that rat really on? He looked at Ripred, and the rat gave him a slow wink. Remember, Gregor, the prophecy calls for only 4 of the 12 to die. Think we can take them, you and I? Okay. He also had one amazing rat on his side. The circle widened, leaving a gap. A huge silver rat strode into the space. Jammed over one ear was a gold crown, clearly designed for a human head. Gregor heard Luxa inhale sharply and guessed it belonged to one of her parents. King Gorger, said Ripred, giving a low bow. I did not hope we would have the honor of your presence here. An unfortunate crawler told us you drowned, Ripred, said the king in a low voice. Yes, well, that was the plan, said Ripred, nodding, but so often plans go awry. We must thank you for bringing the warrior so nearly into our paws. It was Henry's job, really, but no matter, as long as he is here. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to see him for myself before I killed him. So this is he? Asked King Gorger, peering at Gregor. I expected so much more. Oh, do not judge him too quickly, said Ripred. I have found him most delightfully full of surprises. He made his way around the circle, occasionally lifting a front leg to scratch his nose. Each time he lifted his paw, the rats near him flinched. Clausen, Bloodlet, now break my heart. Razor, is that you? You have no idea how it hurts me to see you in His Majesty's company. The rat Razor dropped his eyes away from Ripred's. Was he ashamed? Could rats even feel shame? Ripred came up behind Henry and nudged him forward. Go, 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 stand with your friends. Henry tripped and fell into place beside King Gorger, stepping on his tail. The other rats laughed, but not the king, who whipped his tail from out under Henry and slashed poor Gox in half. Oh, the rats stopped laughing. Gregor saw the spider's blue blood gushing onto the ground. It was that quick. In a split second, a third member of the quest was dead. Why has everyone stopped laughing? Said King Gorger. Go on, laugh, he ordered. And the rats let out a sound like sheep bleating. He stretched out on the ground in a pose of complete relaxation, but Gregor could see his muscles were still tense with anger. Who's next? Said King Gorger. Come, do not be shy. Shall we take care of the pup? She looks soon to expire anyway. He trained his ratty eyes on Boots. Not Boots, thought Gregor. Not while I stand. Something nagged at the back of his brain. What was it? What did it remind him of? And suddenly he knew. He knew what the next part of the prophecy meant. The last who will die must decide where he stands. The fate of the 8 is contained in his hands. It's me, he realized. I'm the last to die. It was clear. It was Gregor the rats wanted. He was the warrior. He was the threat. He was the one who had to decide where he stood. And it wasn't going to be right here, watching people he loved die. He was a warrior, and the warrior saved people. Once he knew, it was easy. He judged the height, ran 7 steps, and hurtled over the silver back of King Gorger. A howl rose up behind him as he flew down the road. From some rat screams that came after that, he guessed Luxa, Aurora, and Ripred had gone into action to cover him. But he was pretty sure that every able-bodied rat was chasing after him. Good. That way, with any luck, the others might escape, except Henry and Ares. He didn't care what happened to them. The flashlight in his hand dimmed to a faint glow, and he tossed it off the side. It was slowing him down anyway. But running in the dark was no good. He might trip, and he had to lead the rats as far away as possible from everybody else. Then he remembered the light on his hat. He had meant to save it for the last resort. If there was ever a last resort, this was the moment. He flipped on a switch without breaking stride, and the powerful beam lit the road out in front of him. But the road! He had forgotten how short the road was. No more than 100 yards ahead of him loomed the canyon, the one of immeasurable depth. He didn't stand a chance trying to run around the edge of it. The rats would have him in moments. He didn't want to die that way. He didn't want to give the rats the satisfaction of eating him. He could hear them behind him, breathing, snapping their teeth. King Gorger snorted in fury. In one horrible moment, the last piece of the prophecy became clear to Gregor. So bid him take care. Bid him look where he leaps. As life may be death, and death life again reaps. He had to leap. And by his death, the others would live. That was it. That was what Sandwich had been trying to say all along. And now he believed Sandwich. He put on a final burst of speed, just like the coach taught him in track. He gave it everything he had. In the last few steps before the canyon, he felt a sharp pain in the back of his leg. And then the ground gave way under his feet. Gregor, the Overlander, leapt. Boom! Guess you're going to have to come back tomorrow. Find out what happens after he leaps. Don't you dare go look it up. Don't you dare go listening to it online. Don't you dare. This is the very height of this moment, and I wanted to stop here because I know how much my team loves it when I stop it at a very, very, very interesting part. I will be honest, though. I will say one last thing before we get moving. I will tell you the 3 words that start chapter 25. Gregor soared out. Ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful to have shared this time with you. I'm honored and privileged to read with you. It gives me the opportunity to commit my time to making sure that on a daily basis I take a little bit of time to do my reading and to learn a little bit more about how a writer builds an awesome story. All that we have read thus far has led up to this moment where Gregor leaps. You can dislike me for not going on, but I promise, come back tomorrow and we'll be here again. So, until I meet you again, until we are together again, Gregor is in the air somewhere between land and piranhas, or actually nothingness, right? He never heard anything drop into the pit of despair. And we'll have to come back and find out what happens. I think I have a pretty good idea, and I bet you probably do too, because you already have some information prior to this. So take that information and chew on it for a while, literally, or actually figuratively, and see what you can come up with. What's going to happen next? And until we see each other again, I love you. Now, get out of here. I mean it. Get out of here. Go have fun.